오후에 좀 좋아하실 텐데요.
Thank you all for the opportunity. It's always nice to be back here in Korea. It's very nice to see a lot of people here today. A lot of people in a very interesting conferences going on as well. Been part of the sessions as well previously. I'm the last slot for today. I know you guys have had a long day, so I thank you for being still with me. A slight tweak in terms of what I wanted to present today, and this is more because of what I've heard and I've seen and the developments that I see coming up in Korea. I think there's a great opportunity for a lot of the Korean companies who are developing innovative drugs here in Korea. And it's about time to now look at it on a basis beyond just Korea. And I think one important opportunity that you have right in your backyard is the Asian opportunity. And so I wanted to just share with you with regards to some of the Asian opportunities and how do you go about leveraging them. So it's always good to start off with understanding, really, is there really an opportunity? Is there really R&D being done here? And this was one of the key data that finally mapped out both government as well as industry-led R&D that's been done, environmental R&D that's been done in Asia. So this was published in New England Journal of Medicine just this year in January. And basically what it showed was really in the last 5 years, from 2007 to taking the 5-year period from 2007 to 2012, what's happened? What's happened in the environmental R&D expenditure? And if you look at it, it's really interesting to see that in absolute dollars, you see the US shrinking in terms of dollars, and the shrink is quite huge. And you see the same shrinkage, not that much, but still shrinkage in terms of Europe. But you see a tremendous increase, over $20 billion in terms of increase in R&D expenditure in Asia, in absolute dollars. That's huge. And if you look at the CAGR of some of these countries in Asia and how they compare to the United States and Europe, you see a lot of them investing heavily in terms of R&D. And this is both government as well as industry. So local companies as well as government investing into R&D. So of course Korea, 11.4%, and China close to 33%. So you see the R&D expenditure. Is there a market? Is there a market in Asia? So when we look at the numbers and you see where the opportunities are, the majority of pharma companies look at this on a regular basis because they want to know where they want to put the bets, where they want to put their investments. You see a huge amount of opportunities vis-a-vis the emerging markets. These are some of the selected emerging markets. But if you look at Asia as a whole, majority of these markets are growing much faster than the traditional markets or the mature markets, US and EU top 5. So if they're going to be placing their bets and they're going to be increasing their expenditure, or they want to be able to look at where their products can be gaining the most in terms of sales and opportunity, then they will need to be looking at some of these Asia-Pacific markets. So is this growth sustainable? I mean, whenever you want to see growth, you need to look at all the macroeconomic factors. Is this sustainable in the long run? And so if you look at the economic factors or the macroeconomic factors, the ones that correlate the most with regards to healthcare pharma spend and R&D dollars is dependent on, firstly, of course, the pharma market. I've already mentioned that. The growth rate of these pharma markets, is that growing in that period, forecasting forward. Then you need to look at the nominal GDP. Is there growth in terms of the country? Are the countries progressing? And then you need to look at the correlation of the healthcare spend. And all of that, and lastly, very importantly actually in many parts in Asia, is this shift in terms of urban population. Many of you would not realize that last year was actually a milestone year. Reason being, China for the first time flipped from a rural population to an urban population. 51% now in the urban population. And with a huge population size that is significant, that is close to almost 2 United States. So if you look at that opportunity and you look at the healthcare spend, it does show, the macroeconomic factors show that there is an Asian opportunity. So now moving towards what we're seeing and what's happening in the market in terms of clinical trials and clinical development. Is there a drug development opportunity, or is this trend already emerging? And so if we look in the past years from 2008 to 2012, it's amazing to see that the number of global trials have increased tremendously. They're growing at a growth rate of 9.1%, and now they account for 60% of all trials that have been done in Asia, which means majority of large pharma as well as local pharma are now looking towards Asia to do their clinical development. Why would you ask? Well, there are a couple of factors. Number one, if you look at the expenditure in terms of trials, close to 40% of their trial expenditure of a pharma company comes from phase 3 trials. Close to 40%. About 18 to 20% comes from phase 2 trials, and about 10% comes from phase 1 trials. The rest of it is discovery. So a large chunk of that is in clinical development. Then you want to be able to look at, is there an opportunity for them to do it? Why do it in Asia? Then when you look at that vis-a-vis the mature markets like Europe, or you're thinking about the United States, the cost arbitrage, or the arbitrage in terms of savings of doing the same trial in Asia is anywhere between 50 to 70%. So that's a huge opportunity. And when you look at the number of trials that are being done here locally, that will show you that a lot of them are trying to maximize that particular opportunity in Asia. So going forward, which are the key markets that have seen the tremendous bump up in terms of these local trials? So you see a huge amount and close to about 44% in Korea, China, and Japan. Many factors for this as well. A lot of government support here in Korea. A lot of local companies now looking at doing clinical development. Many of them already in early phase. In Japan, a government and a great regulator who has put a clear focus in terms of shortening the timeline. The drug lag in Japan used to be 5 years. Now it's about 1.5 years. So in the last 3 years or 4 years, they've been able to shrink that down tremendously in terms of the regulatory process. So more and more companies are now looking at doing trials in Japan as part and parcel. Of course, trials in Japan are still more expensive. So if you take that vis-a-vis US and Europe, they're close to 120%. So yes, it's more expensive, but then when you look at the opportunity that there's a large pharma market, the second largest pharma market is still in Japan. You do your math and you do the economic benefit, you still look at the fact that that could be something that as a market might be very attractive. Then of course, China has a large population. So all of this points towards there is a great opportunity of trying to look at doing pan-Asian trials. Trying to look beyond your home country into Asia to do a pan-Asian trial because of the cost arbitrage and because of the opportunities available. And then, when we look at the next part of it, is there enough sustainability in terms of local companies to be able to look at and see this Asian opportunity, or be able to take advantage of this Asian opportunity? And it's very interesting to note here, and this is January 2014 data from Pharma Projects, where you're seeing that 25% of that innovation actually is now coming from Korea, in terms of total innovation or innovative products being developed. These are by local companies. And so that is massive, which means Korea has probably an opportunity for Korean companies to now think, how do we maximize or how do I optimize my clinical trials and my clinical development strategy? And of course, Asia will play a big role because we want to be doing it in the most cost-effective and most efficient manner. So I've already convinced you, I hope, that there is an Asian opportunity. Now let me convince you of how you develop that Asian strategy. So the key to developing the Asian strategy is to ask the right questions. So what are the right questions that you need to ask in order to be able to put together a drug development strategy just specifically for Asia? So the first map that I always put together whenever we're going to look at drafting a clinical development strategy is these 5 big areas. So when you want to maximize the probability of success, you need to start off with understanding firstly your product information. You need to understand what is currently your global development, clinical development plan. What is your target product profile? How are you developing it? What is going to be in as part of your development strategy? Where are you going to be doing? And what's relevant to your company? And I'll give you a checklist as I go in the next slide. The next one is in terms of feasibility and site selection. And I cannot mention enough how important this is. Asia is a new frontier. There are many, there's variability in terms of the sites. Quality in terms of investigator experience, in terms of therapeutic knowledge, in terms of standard of care. So the navigation and being able to understand the site selection as well as the feasibility is critical in this entire process. The third part of it is the regulatory landscaping. Many countries, it's a heterogeneous geography, not very much homogeneous like you have in North America, not homogeneous as you have in Europe because of the fact that they have the same guidelines. Every country has a different guideline, has a different interpretation of the guideline, has a different standard in terms of data that is required, has different scenarios that they want you to met as part and parcel of your approval and your registration. There's also a need in terms of different levels of risk benefits. So you have some countries who have adopted the HTA. There are other countries who have not adopted the HTA, but they have some level of value-based mechanisms. And so you need to be understanding the whole dimension and spectrum. And lastly, the timelines. The timelines of starting, building up your entire plan would be varying because different countries, different timelines. You need to be all putting it together to see how you're going to be able to get the most optimal and most efficient way of developing your molecule. The fourth piece is really the Asian medical context. And here we are talking about standard of care. We're talking about treatment guidelines. Each country has very different levels of standard of care being administered. They have different treatment guidelines for the same indication, which means there could be different gold standards currently available in the market. And how do you compete? How do you show your differentiation? And how do you act and show that there is value add and benefit? You need to also then understand how you develop the protocol that might need to be tweaked for that particular country. And so those are things that become very relevant in terms of understanding individual medical context of individual countries. And lastly is the therapeutic expertise. Many countries have many different therapeutic prevalence and epidemiology, as well as an understanding of disease profile that will help in terms of your particular drug and product. And so that would mean mapping it out, which would be the countries that would be of greatest interest in terms of market, in terms of epidemiology, in terms of prevalence, in terms of penetration. So all of that becomes very important. So coming together, you see the complexity. It's not a simple exercise, but what it does do is it helps you, if you look at this holistically, maximize the probability of success as you go through Asian development. This is, I would say, a checklist that I would urge most companies who are going to go through Asian drug development to look at. The four main areas you need to understand is firstly, you need to understand how to assess your compound relevance and priority. This is very much dependent on your company goals. Many companies here are now not looking at developing all the way until phase 3 because 40% of the cost of drug development is phase 3 drugs. Doing it on your own is very expensive. Many of them are looking at bringing it to phase 1, phase 2A, phase 2B, and then being able to out-license it or co-develop it with a bigger partner. So if that's your long-term goals and objectives, you need to understand that is this relevant for those particular partners that you're looking at. Those large pharmas or MNCs, will they be looking at those particular areas? And the way to look at that is there a current unmet medical need? Is that addressing a current unmet medical need? Is your product offering any potential additional clinical value? Most importantly, what is the key opinion leaders thinking about that particular product? And this engagement needs to start very early. Next part of it is the optimizing of the regulatory and development options. You need to then understand, yes, the countries I talked about, the pathways, the regulatory pathways, the ethnic sensitivity, There's a lot more now in terms of stratification through genetic profiling, different ethnicities. It's all being put together in different disease profiles, especially oncology. You need to also then understand, is there any specific regulatory decisions you need to factor into your decision making that could be as roadblocks? Because if you're going to be potentially going into a roadblock, you might as well know it up front and go in with your eyes open rather than take it as a hit unknowingly, and then giving you delays as well as giving you stress, especially for your investors. You need to also then understand the evidence and the strategy. And this is more in terms of the design of the particular trial. How do you design the particular trial with the endpoints which will match what the profiles you have in the countries, which will match what you're trying to determine and you're claiming as a clinical value, which will match the relevance that the MNC pharma is looking for. So three areas that you need to then figure out in terms of design to be able to do that. And lastly, for the long-term benefit as well as for the long-term recruitment process and efficiency, there's a need for epidemiological data, there's a need to understand the site capabilities. And then that goes into the most important part of it, which is the feasibility, which I mentioned earlier. So how do you actually are able to do and able to get good feasibility done in Asia? It's a new frontier. And so how are you able to look at it? And so this was something that Quinta also took as a challenge. And this was presented actually at DIA and got us the Gold Award. And the reason for this is because there is very little that is known in terms of granularity of how much capabilities, what level of site level capabilities, what level of investigator level capabilities, what level of site coordinator level capabilities that are in particular running on certain trials. So this is just an example I put up for South Korea, where you've got 164 approved centers for trials, and then the various degrees in terms of IRBs that have been qualified, as well as the site priority. So this is the first map, and these maps are being done on a regular basis, updated on a regular basis as we look at, and we've got that for all the countries in Asia. But more importantly is, then, let's say if you wanted to look at oncology and wanted to look at gastrointestinal cancer. Why? I'll show you later. It's one of the highest prevalence in Asia, and one of the ones that have been done most often in terms of trials in Asia in the last couple of years. So if you were to look at that, there are 124 qualified IRBs, 74 sites in Korea with oncology capabilities. 36 of them have tremendous amount of lung cancer trial capabilities. 37 of them have gastric cancer capabilities. 8 of them have both lung and gastric cancer capabilities. And then, of course, there are some private sites that was on the brutal side. But ultimately, then this becomes your target segment. How do I are able to penetrate and are able to see what's currently occurring at that particular site? So then that goes to the next level. Now that you've got a country rank, so typically we develop this methodology from Bristol, we do the country rank, and then we do the site tier. We need to then be able to understand on the investigator level, that particular investigator that you want to work on or work with, what level of capabilities they are able to share with you, what experience they are able to bring, what sphere of influence do they have. Are they a key opinion leader? Would they be one of the key people who will be able to share the benefits of your product to a largest sphere of doctors or physicians in a particular therapeutic area? All of that comes into this ranking mechanism. And so we need to look at experience versus conflict of interest. We need to look at what is the past patient enrollment rate of the particular site. What are the startup timelines that they have done in the past? How fast they started up? And of course, from there we then tier them. Tier 1 sites, tier 2 sites, and tier 3 sites. Now we've actually also created an app, so you can do it real time. So this is going to be launched very soon, and you will be able to visualize it. But more importantly, once you've done that, you then need to be able to map out. You've got the site data, but how does this work with regards to the regular landscape that I mentioned? So all of that needs to be laid out. Asia readiness, all different regulatory guidelines, each of these countries that you have ranked, each of these sites that you have put together, how do they lay out in terms of regulatory, how do they lay out in terms of standard treatment guidelines and standard of care, as well as reimbursement. So that becomes the next level of detail. So once you build up your site and feasibility, your next level of details comes from regulatory and medical landscaping. Once you have done that, it's now time for you to make sure that you test the rigor of your protocol. You need to be able to see that is this protocol something that's going to be flying with your key opinion leaders, and how do you do it? And typically the process I've mapped up here is this. So you've got a protocol development team which might be internal or external, depending on the size of the company as well as the model that you're looking at. It could be an outsourced model. They then work on building up this protocol. There's typically a medical advisor, or you should have a medical advisor, internal or external, that then is able to connect directly with those key opinion leaders to share what you're putting out in terms of the protocol. That is determined through the feasibility which I showed you earlier, because they identify which are the key opinion leaders you need to talk to. And external scientific consultation is usually important, and this is usually with the regulator. And so we typically recommend that your first step of your protocol development be two fronts, a two-pronged approach. The KOL, together with the scientific consultation with the regulator at the same time. And as much as possible, that gives you an ability to look at two things, the regulatory requirements and the treatment of care at the same time. So medical landscaping as well as regulatory landscaping being done at the same time. So this is probably an ideal process map to think about as you put together your protocol development stage. I shared with you in terms of what is the therapeutic landscape in Asia. And so this is the top 10 indications that were done in terms of trial volumes in 2012. And so if you look at the top 10 indications, you'll see that the top indications for oncology were breast cancer, gastrointestinal cancer, rheumatoid arthritis or autoimmune disease, and diabetes. Those were the bulk of trials that were being done in Asia. That being said, yes, now you see a lot of capabilities in these particular indications, but it also means there's a lot of competing trials already in your site. And so that goes back to the earlier portion of feasibility. If you are now looking at developing anything in that particular space, you need to then be able to think many of the key opinion leaders, many of those sites would probably be already taken. What's the incentive or what's the motivation of those investigators to do a similar trial in the same area? So all of these considerations also come into play as you map up your trial strategy, which is very important as you build this therapeutic map on a regular basis to understand what capabilities each country is going to be able to bring to you as you develop Asian development strategy. So, in recap, the 5 areas that you need to look at, as I mentioned to you, the product profile, the feasibility and site selection, the regulatory landscaping, the Asia medical context, what's the context in terms of the medical landscape, and lastly, the therapeutic expertise that each country is going to bring to you. These 5 things will help you draft and craft your Asia drug development strategy. So with that, I thank you for the time and happy to take any questions.
질문 있으면 해주시고요. 영어로 하셔도 좋고 한국말로 하셔도 좋고 한국말로 하시면 트랜스레이터가 잘 전해질 겁니다. 질문 없으신가요? I think we have enough time. It's just supposed to be about 4 o'clock. So I think that we have 10 more minutes. Yeah, 15. So we have 15 more minutes. Any questions? No? well, probably. Great. Then probably we are going to meet you again at around 4 o'clock, 4:05. So you have enough relaxing time. Thank you very much, and I'll see you at 4:05 p.m.
So you can thank me for giving me some more time.